So I started Mom Life Comics in 2020, right before the pandemic. And at that time, it actually wasn't Mom Life Comics. I was just, I had a blog and I had a personal Instagram feed that kind of went with my blog, way back from like the early blogging days. And so I started making comics, and I didn't even really call them that then. They were really just more like illustrations about motherhood. And I started making those from my personal Instagram feed just as a creative outlet. And I was looking for a way to talk about the less positive, less like Instagram worthy, less pretty parts of motherhood. And, I was feeling, I had just had my second child. So I was feeling pretty overwhelmed and exhausted. And I really was just looking for a way to communicate that wasn't just through, a picture of me smiling with my kids, because that didn't feel right. So I started making these comics and just posting them to my personal feed. And I saw, on the back end and the analytics that those posts were really being shared far and wide. But I knew that was kind of confusing, because someone would then come to my feed and it was just pictures of me with my family. So the comics didn't really fit. I kept kind of doing those. I would post them here and there for a little while. And then obviously the pandemic hit. And then, they took on a life of their own, because became much more like this, almost like a way to journal or let out some of my frustrations with mothering during the pandemic. And so in like a year later, I created Mom Life Comics and made it more official. And from there, it grew much quicker, because then it was really just an entire feed full of comics. And so if people would click through, they would see that and, be more likely to follow it and to kind of become a part of the conversation that we were having there. And, all it takes now on the internet is one comic going viral, which is kind of what happened. And then it really grew from there. And so the past few years, obviously, I've been much more focused on that. But really, it was from the moment that one of my comics went viral, which was in January 2022, was when I had a comic really go viral and it changed things. And so I've been much more focused on it since then. But I still have, my graphic design business. I still do teach yoga. I still lead yoga retreats and stuff like that. But it's life is much more heavily focused on my comics and my book and everything that kind of has come from that in the past few years. Yeah, well, it's always been very important to me to make the messages that I'm sharing, to make them accessible and to make them easy to kind of understand, even if you're not familiar with some of the concepts I'm talking about. Right. So the mental load of motherhood is something I really care about and I really want to talk about. And it's very important to me to raise awareness of how crippling the mental load can be. But, I feel like for a lot of people, especially a lot of moms who maybe have younger kids or are new to this world of talking about kind of household inequality and parenting inequality, I think it can be a turnoff if you see it approached from like a really a more, I guess I would say, like academic and from standpoint, or sometimes if it feels too angry, it can, I think, because our culture doesn't support women in being angry and in speaking out, it can feel like it's not something you want to engage with if it comes across too angry or too academic. So I think comics, in a really roundabout way that I wouldn't have necessarily predicted, are a really interesting entry point, because people can read them and laugh and see themselves in it, but they're also being introduced to these concepts that are heavier and are more intense. And I think comics also allow women and mothers to take these topics to their partners, because they can say, oh, look at this. This is like us. Ha, ha, ha. And they can both laugh. And then maybe it sparks a conversation. And I think that's the feedback I've gotten that's meant the most to me is hearing from people who say, that I was able to show this comic to my husband and he saw himself in it and we were able to laugh about it, but then also talk about how this isn't fair. Right. So I do think because comics, and especially because they're colorful and they're kind of happy colors, and or at least pastels and softer colors, I think they do allow people to enter into the conversation in a less threatening way. And I think with a lot of these topics, that's kind of what we need, simply because our culture isn't ready to talk in like a mainstream way about women's anger or women's unpaid labor. I think that still makes a lot of people really angry. A lot of men who don't want to, who want to uphold the system because they benefit from it. If I could give one message to new moms or moms who are struggling or in the thick of it, I think it would be that it's not you. Like, you are not the problem. The problem is our culture. You're not failing at this. It's not that you are not cut out to be a mother or not cut out to do it all. It's that no one can, and that the expectations on mothers are truly unattainable. It's not, you are not the problem. The problem is a much bigger one than you. I think until we change this, motherhood is going to continue to be too much for women. And I think we're all going to continue to feel like we're failing and drowning until we make some big societal and cultural shifts. But just know that if you feel like this is impossible, it's because it really is. And we are set up to fail right now. That doesn't mean that motherhood isn't still amazing in so many ways, but that it's going to continue to be really hard for moms until we make some big shifts. So it's not personal, it's political, it's cultural, it's societal. And you, the new mom, the struggling mom, you are doing a great job. It's just that no one can succeed in our current system.